Hey everybody, this is Perch, and we have a bunch of Future State comics here. We've got 6 this week: Catwoman, the Immortal Wonder Woman, Nightwing, Shazam, Superman: Worlds of War, and the Next Batman. And obviously, there's going to be spoilers here, so you're going to read these for yourselves, and you should feel free to. Overall, this week, I think this was probably the weakest week of the 3 by a mile, and a couple reasons for that. The art took a definite step down from where it was at. I mean, a lot of the art looks extremely rough or pretty shaky. It's definitely got a webtoons kind of indie comic feel, and I don't mean that in a good way. With the exception of Superman: Worlds of War and Shazam, the art's rough. Catwoman's not bad as well, but Wonder Woman, Nightwing, and the Next Batman are extremely rough, and that's pretty disappointing to see. The other big question mark is, so you have the Next Batman, which is arguably the highest profile book, with the marketing and everything else going into Yara Flor's new series. Maybe you can now argue that's the bigger one, but the Next Batman, you've got John Ridley telling a big story. You've got Nick Darrington on the first issue, and he definitely helped. Darrington's style kind of helped make this story, a step up. So issue number 2, we now get Laura Braga on art, and it's the style is very different from Nick. It's a lot rougher. It's a lot some of the anatomy is kind of screwy. It's a definite step down, and I think there's a couple instances here where there's just some artists on these books that are not ready for prime time by any stretch of the imagination. So let's go through them. Again, your mileage may vary. If you like the comic, that's totally fine. There are a couple series: the Immortal Wonder Woman, Superman: Worlds of War, and the Next Batman are the larger issues. They're the ones with the bonus stories, and the others are relatively straightforward, just a basic comic. So I don't run out of gas midway through this. Let's start with the bigger issues first. So we have the Immortal Wonder Woman, which is the team of Becky Cloonan and Michael Conrad. Michael Conrad expressing a lot of strangely public anxiety about being reviewed well in this comic. This story, okay, so the coloring is really nice. It's got some good kind of dynamic colors, some interesting stuff going on with how that's all put together. The art, though, is awful rough in some areas. It degrades over time. There's definitely some pages you see are doing very well, and then particularly when you get into the action, Darkseid loses a lot of dimensions. It starts looking very, very very rough, very the anatomy starts to fall apart at various times here. This story doesn't have a lot going for it, to be honest, and it worries me a little bit about what's going to happen with this pair on the series. Basically, Wonder Woman, she's kind of on this. It's a very far future, and she's hanging out on Earth, and there's some kind of mysterious threat. Big Barda, Apocalypse has unified the new gods to some extent. It's some big cosmic threat. It's Null. Null is basically coming. No, it's the anti-life equation is undoing reality, and Darkseid kind of plummets to Earth for kind of reasons unknown. He needs maybe help, or he needs to flee this kind of the nothingness. It's from the Neverending Story. The Nothing is coming to take over the planet, but Darkseid decides to beat up Superman for some reason, and he kind of easily does so. And he fights Wonder Woman and then kills a bunch of Amazons who are not keeping in as great a shape as they used to. Just throwing that out there. And the Swamp Thing's kind of basically, but this story is not great. Not a lot's going on. There's not a lot going on. The backup story, the first one, is Nubia, and this story is actually better, I would say, than the front story by L.O. McKinney. Aletha Martinez is the penciler. It's actually got an inker, Mark Morales, and as a result, the art just looks a lot more put together. There's still, again, a little bit of roughness, but in general, things are just a little bit better. There's definitely some, once again, the anatomy. Like, somebody's got to teach, you don't have the head and the upper body be so much larger than the legs. So Nubia's not done a lot of favors here. But basically, it looks like Grail is here to do something, up to some villainy in a museum. And whatever, she's in Atlanta and she's trying to steal something. Anyway, Nubia takes the case and is able to defeat her. That part of the action's nice. We get a little fight back and forth. We get later to the Ebony Web, which is where she's hanging out with her aunt. And then they kind of have a lot of talking and drinking. We get about 8, 9, 10 pages of kind of dialogue and what's Grail up to. And then suddenly Nubia is whisked away. And the aunt just sips her liquor. Anyway, that's a comic. Nubia's story is better than the main one. I don't know. Again, Wonder Woman, not a lot going on and pretty clunky in the dialogue and the story. Nightwing. Nightwing is, let's see, who's on the Nightwing team? Andrew Constant, Nicholas Scott. Art's, it's okay. I've seen better from Nicholas Scott. I think Scott has a good talent, but something is off in this work, and I'm not sure if it's the art or the color, or maybe it's because Scott is doing the penciling and inking, but Scott's a good talent, and there's some aspects of this that, again, get a little clunky, but by and large, you can't complain. It's still on the upper half of the comics, definitely here. But I think, I don't know, if they're just going more rough with the coloring, or just I would be almost positive that if you looked at the pencils, the uncolored work, it looks a lot better. But at any rate, we get a little story. We're back to the magistrate. So the magistrate's, got robots and they're tracking stuff, and it's again, you have to be bought into the magistrate, especially this week, because we have 3 issues dealing with the magistrate. So that's what we've got here. We get thank you, Nicholas Scott. Got a nice picture of Nightwing in the shower, so that's good. That people like that. He gets to fight in his little towel. There's some fan service, and in comes the new Batman, Jace Fox, who Nightwing fairly easily dispatches. I think part of the problem is this chin strap that has been drawn just doesn't look quite right when it's all colored up. Anyway, but it's he's fighting Peacekeeper 6, or I don't know. It's basically the magistrate is heading into Arkham, and there's they're coming for Nightwing, because they've tracked him, and we're going to get a battle between Nightwing and the magistrate. Sure. Superman Worlds of War. I screwed up and actually reviewed a comic. Superman Worlds of War gives us a bunch of stories here. We get, first off, the main story, the main plot is intending to be Superman, and he's fighting on Warworld for some reason in kind of gladiator tournament. But that is not the story you're getting here. What the story we get is there's kind of a remembrance, a tribute to Superman, and they are basically remembering what Superman meant for them. So people go to Metropolis, and Superman is missing, and they all kind of have different memories of what's going on with Superman. And they're trying to speculate what happened to him. And they keep doing this, and then finally, several pages in, basically 16 pages in, we get to actually, where is Superman? And he's off in a gladiator pit, and he's ready to fight. No, so Michael Janin is doing this, and it looks pretty. It's definitely some pretty looking art. But keep in mind, you're only getting kind of one big 2-page splash, a third page, and then 4. So you're getting really 4 pages, one of which is scenery of Warworld. And the rest of this is taken up of some kids and people in Smallville kind of remembering Superman. So they're definitely taking their time. I don't remember if I think this comic only has 2 parts to it. So, I mean, okay. Then we get a little Mr. Miracle story. This is the second Mr. Miracle story we get, and this one isn't quite as good as the first, but it's still pretty cool. They're doing some pretty nice stuff here with Shiloh, who's a character that definitely, I think, has needed more. We do get a reference in this book if you got the text, send a message to the authority or the JLA for backup. So that's good. So it is inferring that the authority is coming, so it's getting name dropped now more in comics. There's no way they could screw that up. But anyway, a pretty solid little story with Mr. Miracle. Again, at least you get a lot of Mr. Miracle. Like, you get more action and more Mr. Miracle doing stuff in this backup story, certainly, than you did with Superman. And then we move into Midnighter, and this is by Blecky Clunan and Michael Conrad again. This comic is probably a better one than their Wonder Woman story, but there's not much to it. Gleb Melnikov is on this, and his art is super rough. Like, he could benefit from some John Byrne level of polish here, I would say. Anyway, so we get a pretty scratchy, definite, some use of kind of one color, two color pages. And stuff. We don't get many talking heads, just a couple panels of talking heads. It's okay, but again, the art looks pretty scratchy in some areas. So again, a little bit of jarring coming off of the others, but it's not bad. We basically get the Midnighter who's kind of creeping in, doing some dirty work here, and then he runs into, from what we can tell, Apollo. But the story just keeps going and going, and it's in theory a lot of action, but it's so scratchily rendered that it just kind of looks like a bit of a confusing mess for much of it. And then finally, our last story, it is the Black Racer story. This is by Jeremy Adams and Shia Om. And this is the story of the new Black Racer. It's maybe the new Black Racer. Anyway, it's mechs, and the characters are basically in some kind of forced tournament by the look of things. She gets them out, and then she faces some art. But the Black Racer story had a little bit more going for it. Probably, of this comic, in terms of actually doing stuff with characters, I think our Mr. Miracle and our Black Racer story are probably our strongest of this book. You do start to get kind of by the time you get to the end of this, you're like, okay, that's enough of this. And then finally, of the bigger issues, we get to the next Batman. And like I already mentioned, we're doing art by Laura Braga. Yes, Nick Darrington's doing the breakdowns of this, but the art looks so strikingly different that you're just kind of confused with a year of planning why you didn't get just Nick Darrington to finish the job. It's kind of confusing. But anyway, the Batman fights the Magistrate, and just like he did in the last issue, the dialogue's getting pretty clunky. It's weird to see a John Ridley, who is a pretty classic writer, having dialogue like what you see in this book, like, man, what happened to thugs being cowardly and superstitious? I don't know. This one's fast, fights, angry, but that's it. No skills. It's not like this is I don't know, pretty entry level dialogue, all things considered. But anyway, we get through this issue. Okay, he's trying to do his best to kind of help the civilians who are out there. We get some inference of pedophiles, so that's great. Gotham just keeps getting better. Social media, trolling for kids, awesome. That's great stuff. And then we get that's sarcasm. I don't know why. It's very exhausting at this point. And then our backup story here is the first one is basically it's Batgirls. This is by Vita Ayala and Anki on the art. Again, pretty rough. A lot of this looks very much like very, very indie level of art, and not in a good way, but just in a not ready for prime time kind of way. Once again, we've got pretty crazy anatomy and just kind of all over the place. Characters look different one panel to another. Big Barda has got the same basic height and physique as Spoiler, so okay, sure. Why not? And basically we get a prison break leading up to Orphan, and here's Cheetah and Two-Face, and I don't know, Joker's hanging out with Harley for some reason, and I don't know, Beast Boy's in here, sure. Not a great story. This is pretty pretty. I mean, there's not a lot here. It's, they go to prison and then they decide to fight. It's clunky. And then our last story here, our last backup story is Gotham City Sirens, Ladies Night Out, Paula Stephen Bergen, Rob Haynes. I don't know. Anyway, we've got Catwoman, we've got Poison Ivy, and there's some kind of heist going on here. Again, I mean, it's fine. Maybe of the stories, this is the strongest-ish one. I don't know. I can't say that. They're all pretty dull. These are duds. Again, it reads like somebody who's way too happy with themselves. None of this seems like anybody's taking anything seriously. There's a bunch of kind of jokey stuff in here. The Catwoman we get here looks cyberpunky, and anyway, it's a very different Catwoman that we're going to see in the actual Catwoman comic that we're about to talk about. The Magistrate's hanging out in this one. Why we're getting goofy Catwoman doing stuff with Ivy, who's got some little plant pasties over her fishnet crop top. I don't know. There's some dancing that goes on. I not sure what they're doing here. Two more issues here. We're just going to save the best for last here. Catwoman. Catwoman looks fairly good, looks pretty good. The art is pretty solid. This is basically a train heist is going on with some twists and turns. There's the magistrates running a train and they're putting people on the train. Somebody watched Snowpiercer, and that's basically what we have here. Catwoman is going to infiltrate the train. There's some pretty dynamic kind of storytelling, some interesting stuff here in terms of the art and how they're putting it together. The train is transporting a super, super dangerous prisoner. And we get, I'm not even going to begin to, Omnimathebia, the guy who speaks in sounds, from Kevin Smith's run, I believe. So he shows up, and that's some good stuff. And then we see a reveal that Talia was in disguise, and she's here to break out Bruce. Not completely sure, is this story meant to come before Dark Detective or after, or everything matters. So maybe none of it needs to be in any order. I don't know. But the comic looks nice. It's a reasonable story. Catwoman, probably the second best of the week, I would say. And our very best is probably Shazam. So Shazam is a case where the story is reasonable. It looks good. Tim Sheridan on script, Eduardo Penskia on pencils. And this book is basically, we're dealing with kind of the trials of Shazam. And we get Vixen, and we get a couple other DC characters. We get a pretty nice assortment of Miss Martian and Powerhouse and Bunker and some characters that are being used here in kind of an interesting way. Giganta, a Manhunter robot. So if you're a fan of the DC universe, they bring in Creeper. There's a lot going on in this story where, again, not a perfect story by any stretch of the imagination, but it definitely has more of a sense of, something is going on, and the Checkmate's involved, and there's a few other people. So there's some good stuff. We see kind of the nightmare that Shazam has put himself into, and that at one point, many, many years ago in Hell, there is a case where he needed to be in two places at once. And so Shazam made a deal with Necron to separate himself and Billy into two entities, and Billy is chained up, basically, to protect the Rock and be prisoner to it, while Shazam would go back and continue to fight problems. And this has led to a very different Shazam, an angrier, kind of hollow or broken Shazam. So that's some interesting stuff. They're doing this is more of one of those hooks of, how did we get here with this character? What's going to happen next? What does this mean to Shazam as a character? So, all in all, I think Shazam's probably your strongest issue. Catwoman is right up there with it. And then it gets pretty poor pretty quick. We have, I don't even know. Nubia is probably your best backup in this mix. Probably the Mr. Miracle as well. Those two stories are probably your strongest. Pretty disappointing on the art. Again, the art looks like it just, things went backward and fast. And I mean, it doesn't help that we got DCeased this week and Batman, Catwoman, and Rorschach, and some other more accomplished artists on here. But this art looks pretty rough. This is definitely looking like somebody's not spending the money they used to spend. I think, like, get Ryan Sook off that abomination of a Bendis book right now, Legion of Superheroes, and get him onto one of these. Like, come on, like reunify. All in all, I think this is the weakest week, and unfortunately, I think week 1 was probably the strongest. Week 2 was a little weaker, and then week 3 we're into now we're on the downward trajectory here for Future State. So maybe things are going to pick up and turn around. I certainly hope so. But now it comes to you. What did you like? The one neat thing about Future State I'm finding is every week, different people are liking different things. Different people find strength in different books, and that's kind of nice to see. I appreciate that. I like how the opinions are more mixed. So I'm curious to hear what people think of week 3 and what you liked, what you didn't like. Let me know in the comments below. Otherwise, hey, like and subscribe. Send me an email. Follow me on social media. All that stuff's in the description. Thanks for listening.